I guess some quick introductions before we get into it. So nice to meet everybody. This is Daniel Biondi. I'm the Senior Product Manager for Payroll here. I've been at Greenshades for about 2 full years, just about to hit it. Before that, I had background in HCM and, as you see here, background engineering. So electrical and computer engineering is where I started, and since I've graduated and changed a little bit into being product and business oriented. So that's where I sit now. Like I said, been here for about 2 years, been payroll and time the whole time. And Amber?
I'm Amber Manuel. I've been with Greenshades for about 3.5 years. I started off in the technical support department before moving over to sales. I'm now in pre-sales for about a year, working in the sales engineering role. Previous to Greenshades, I was in service industry.
Alrighty, so today's presentation is on cost reporting, direct labor costs, project accounting, all of those fun words, and the things that Greenshades does to facilitate those ideas. So we do this through more or less the idea of custom fields. Cost accounting and the idea of project accounting, labor costs, there's various ways to associate these. There's various ways to track it in tons of different softwares. And Greenshades took an approach that was looking to cover any scenario, more or less, with any integrating partner. So you'll see, for those who have used different systems, you'll see and notice and be familiar with how different each project accounting software can be and how different the reporting on them can be. The idea that Greenshades looked at was, how can we set up a situation in payroll where you can freeform create any type of accounting and tracking and cost reporting that'll fit your business, that'll fit your industry. So a little bit of high level on cost accounting here, right? It says cost accounting identifies all your costs associated to help you determine your ROI on your investment. And there's a few ways to break this down in the world of payroll. There's the straight up payroll itself, the post payroll, right? But more importantly, there's your ledger. And your general ledger and the details of your general ledger and how it's broken down are typically the way that you're going to figure out your financials on any given pay run. And more importantly, how that ledger is allocated individual pieces of information is what will give you the full breakdown of your cost report and your expenses. So in our world, it says one critical point is labor costs. In our world, you can set up these custom fields to look and feel and act however your business wants them to look and feel and act. So if you were to have an individual project, you can label that project. If you were to have a specific client you're billing, you can label that client. If you were to have a specific task that's being worked on by one individual, you can label that task. The idea is to get as granular as needed, so then your ledger output is as granular as you need it to be. And then you produce your downstream results at that level. All right, so this is just a little bit about exploring labor costs themselves. I probably don't need to go too in depth here. I'm sure anybody who is looking to track it will fully understand this. But of course, you have fixed labor costs, which are anything that's going to be standard and always paid out. So your payroll. Then you have variable labor costs, whether that's the cost of your COGS and your goods sold, or it's a variable piece of labor for that employee themselves that they have a varying rate, or they have multiple positions and placements. And then the overall summary of this is your direct labor costs. What is going to come out from those employees that are actually involved in the production, and what are you going to report on from payroll? And then this is outside our world, but indirect labor costs for employees not directly involved in the production of a product. How can I report on their work and make sure that that's involved in my financials? All right, so now it's the Greenshades piece of it and talking about how we go about covering direct labor costs. So here's our pay run wizard. I'm sure most of those on this call have already seen this and understand and know how our wizard works. But our wizard walks people through a step-by-step, easy to use, easy to understand process that gives you a handheld walk from start to finish, adding employees to all the way to getting your arrears, benefits, deductions in. The second step of this wizard is really where you're going to track everything and anything that's going to have to do with your labor costs, right? That's what you're paying your employees, the hours and earnings. Those hours and earnings have a ton of calculations, automation, taxation that will all be more or less automated from the point of putting in some basic information and codes. The more detailed part of this is the custom field piece, which I don't have an image here yet. It's on the next screen, which will pop up on the right side. So beyond your hours, overtime, base rate of pay, et cetera, you can go one step further and allocate specific fields that are appropriate to your business. So you see on the right there, you see project and client ID. Those are two really good examples. I saw manufacturing came into here, right? And for those in manufacturing, could very easily allocate that to project accounting. You select project, right? You say that this is the project that was worked on by this employee during this period of time. In this screenshot, you see you got position A, a set department, a location, a work period. And you'd say on this line, they work project A. Let's say we selected that. On the second line, they work project B, but they're in the same location. So at all times, you can continue to break down project C, project D, whatever they worked on for any individual hour, you continue to break it down in your earnings. Now, conversely, we have someone who put staffing in here. In staffing, of course, you're billing clients. You're billing clients for the stuff that was worked by these individual employees on the client and on the job site that they're at, right? So that client ID is probably one of multiple fields you'd use. I imagine in most cases, you might want to use something like a client ID and then moreover a job site. You do have locations, but locations are your taxable location. Maybe that's a little different than what a job site needs to. So you might want something like the client ID, so that's my billable client, then the job site, so the actual place in which that work would have taken place. So you could see there's two, more or less, we have two intermingled examples here for a reason. You can kind of tailor our custom fields to work toward whatever industry you're in. All right, so then back to the GL. So I already kind of preluded to this before, but the GL, of course, is your output, right? This is post pay run. We set all that stuff up. We had these custom fields applied. We said we're going to apply this client as the client that's being tracked for that employee on that earning, or we're going to apply this project. Well, after you did all that, you ran payroll. Great, they got paid. How are you going to go report on it all? How are you going to go bill your clients? Typically, a lot of it's going to come out of your GL, and you're going to send your GL somewhere and report on that. It could come from your GL, or maybe you just do straight up post payroll reporting. You don't need anything to do with your accounts, right? Because your GL is more or less a summary and a reflection of your accounting. But if you're doing your accounting, you're going to want to split your GL per those allocations. So in the case of, if I go back to the last slide, in the case of something like a client ID, you'd have a custom field, like you see here in this dropdown for client ID, and you would want to split all of your downstream allocations based on that ID. So if you were to have 40 iterations of it and you had your employee work at 40 different places over that period of time, you'd want every individual earning split out with their downstream benefits and employer taxes, because that's what's billable for you as a staffing client. You want them split out for each of those clients that you're billing, right? So you select clients. If you're in something like we saw here for manufacturing or whatever industries you might be in, maybe you select another secondary field or something like a project or a task. And then you'll do the same, right? You'd select that individual field and you'd break out your GL reporting and have all your downstream subsections splitting by that selection. Now, of course, for more standard use cases, if you're not going to get into custom field, you can also split your general ledger all by department's position and work location. We call these Greenshades standard fields. Position, department, and work location are always there, always present, always usable. They don't have to be. Work location is the only one that's necessarily a requirement. The other two are really just a standard supported Greenshades field, but you do not have to use position or department. You don't have to check any of those boxes. It's just an example on the left showing position check because it's a common one to split on. Any questions? I feel like I should stop here. I kind of gave like the full overview of custom fields at this point. So before I go into a demo, any questions thus far?
Actually, Daniel, thank you for asking. Let me see here. Yeah, there's a question that came in. How does burden, taxes, and benefits get attributed to jobs for job profitability?
Good question. So the actual burden itself, we're not going to track your full burden in Greenshades, right? We will track all of the actual payroll expenses, but the total burden will need to be tracked somewhere else in some third-party system. So in a second, you'll see a demo here for Business Central. We'll send this data down to Business Central, for example, and then you can figure out the full results of your profitability there. In other cases, we have partners like Bullhorn, where we'd send it back to them and they would track the burden. So your total burden cost, you would need to figure out in whatever downstream reporting system you have, and we're just gonna give the input data to it. All right, let's do the demo itself. So we're starting this in Greenshades. Like we said, this is a demo through and through from Greenshades to Business Central, Microsoft Business Central. So you'll see us start in Greenshades, open up a pay run, and send it back through Business Central for the reporting piece in the ledger. You see we're starting a pay run here. For those unfamiliar with the module, I'll pause real quick. You see it says run payroll, and then you select from a list here. This list is all your scheduled pay runs. So this list of biweekly is all their coming biweekly pay runs. We selected the top one. I'll skip that past loading for us. And you get into the pay run itself, and you have your full list of employees, and then you have your earnings and hours. And this is the primary point of entering your data to actually track any of your project accounting fields, right? So in this case, we have jobs, and you can see we're applying each individual job per each line for one person, right? So this one person has 3 lines all across this work period, and over that period, they worked 3 different jobs. So we will allocate those as 3 different separate itemized transactions, right? So this person now will have a job on each of these individual lines, and they will be reflected as such downstream. For the next second here, we assign a few more. You can see it recalcing. So this is just us calculating any changes. And then you can do the same on additional employees. Go through your pay run. Note that on the deductions and benefit screens, you wouldn't have actually needed to change anything here from those jobs. So like I said, that split allocation selection you made when you said job, right? In this case, you would have selected job as what you're going to split your GL on. It will be doing it automatically. So you're not going to go into deduction and say, they worked on job 1. I have to go manually say, here's one line for deductions. Here's one line for my taxes to say, let's split those out. It will automatically make that decision once you select your job as your downstream splittable field. It will make that percentage breakdown. So it'll say, all right, here's their total earnings and here's what they did, and here's how much was allocated to each of their jobs. And as such, I need to prorate my benefits and employer taxes as such. No manual input needed. We get to the end here, just go through arrears, review and submit. You submit your pay run. And then really where it all matters, the post-pay reporting, you create a GL batch. For those unfamiliar, a batch is really more or less just this individual pay run's general ledger activity. So you create this batch. From creating that batch, there you go. From creating this batch, you'll have all your transactions generated into the screen. They will have already had that setup that we talked about before, that split option to say, let's split them based on jobs. And you'll send them over to an integrated partner. In this case, like we said, we're talking about BC, Business Central. So we send it over. We have a full journal here of all the payroll data that came out into your GL, split per job. And you can see job 3, 4, 5, etc. here, all broken down and translated into your ledger, in this case, Business Central and their job module.
Hey, Daniel, I just want to take a quick moment and interject here. We had another question come in. Would you like to oh, you want to take it now? Okay, perfect. The question came in and it asks, can this custom job field be tied bidirectionally to the job planning or job task lines in BC?
They could be. So any field, any of these custom fields can be manually mapped to any individual field in BC. So in this case, Patrick was asking about using, which field we're using the job field and job task. So in this case, it would be a mapping exercise for us upon implementation to say, all right, we want job, which we set up as job in this case, to map to job task, or you said just straight up job planning, I'm sorry. And then you map those as such. Otherwise, they would go to standard mapping. But yes, to answer your question, yes, you can map them and make them flow to that specific field.
To add to that question, can you add additional levels with dependency? Job planning, job task?
That's it. An interesting question. There is no dependency. I mean, I'll start with answering pretty straight. There's not going to be a level dependency where you have a job and that job drives a task and here's your list. But you can create individual fields for all of those. I'll just go show it here, right? So if you were to have your base job and then beyond that you were to have a job task, you would come in here and make job task. and then have your full list of items for all your job tasks, task 1, whatever it might be, right? Task 1, task 2, etc., right? So on and so forth. So you can have individual qualified fields for it, but they're not going to drive each other. Cool. So, I mean, I'm already kind of pre-showing the piece I want to get into in the UI, but you guys can see this is more or less the setup and interface required to build these custom fields. It's very straightforward. As you saw me doing there, you basically more or less are defining a list of items and a list of possible selections. So when you're in that parent wizard, like in my demo, you have a list of things to select from and apply as the values. Not shown here, but one additional thing to consider is for those who use dimensioning, you can set up dimensions in our system and apply a custom field as a dimensioned custom field. And what that'll more or less do is whatever your defined dimension is, you can select from that list of the dimension to apply as the earning identifier on your payroll. So you would basically see a third option, your text, which is open freeform text, your list, or third option for dimensions would have been dimensions. So any dimension you have defined. I guess I can show quickly here a text field. So just to clarify, when it said text, what does it mean? It's what it sounds like. It's a freeform field. So if you want to set up a client ID list, but I don't know, let's say you have a list, but you want to make sure that every time you define it, you have a extra piece of identification that is malleable and changeable. Like, I don't know, let's say it changes from the set client ID to client ID like 1 and then 2. So you would have a standard field for your project and then an extra thing to identify them. You can openly type instead of just have it all predefined and set as a list. This really is most useful to have an open field if it's a constantly changing thing. Anything else, for the most part, you probably want to have as a selectable list of items. But the open field gives you a little more flexibility to further define. Often I'd probably use it as a special of some sort, like a special character or modifier. So you have your base field, and then you can modify it with the additional open text. Sometimes it could be nothing as simple as a note, right? It could be literally just a note tied to that field.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for attending. Want to thank Daniel and Amber for walking us through this today. We really appreciate that. So thanks so much for being here. Enjoy the rest of your day and have a great one.